In this video, I'm going to show you how to deal with your GE front load washing machine to give you a few tips to help you unlock, test, and replace it altogether. If you are having issues that are infrequent, I would suggest using the GE front load diagnostic entry system and find the error codes to the machine. If the unit's having problems off and on, I'm going to have a link to that video in the description instead of having to repeat everything in this video. If the door is locked, let me show you how to open the lock. If the door lock is operational in any capacity, make sure that the unit has been unplugged, left alone for 30 seconds, and then plugged back in and allowed to boot up. Sometimes that will actually unlock the door for you and solve the lock issue. If not, you should be able to press and hold either the start/pause button or power button for 15 seconds to cycle the unit and get it unlocked as well. This doesn't always work, but sometimes it does and is worth trying. Now, let's try to use the forced command to open the door lock via the software. Make sure that you have a fresh boot up of the system, having it unplugged and plugged back in. Press and hold the start/pause button while rotating the dial 8 times counterclockwise or a full 180 degrees from where you started. Release the button and it should flash a 0, and then all lights will flash on and off, indicating that it is in forced mode like what you see in the video. Then you're going to rotate the dial to option number 13. This is the forced door lock test. This will demand that the unit will open the lock if it is responsive at all. And if the door lock opens at this point, it could have been just a random board issue, or the lock could be going bad. If it's still locked, there should be a release on it that we can use in just a little bit, but we got to take the machine apart to do this. And to access and repair and replace the door lock, you're going to need a Phillips head screwdriver. For the test, you'll need a multimeter with thin leads, a door boot spring tool, and then either a flat-bladed screwdriver or needle nose pliers to deal with the door gasket. To start to disassemble the washing machine, you need to remove the dispenser box. Pull it out as far as it will go, then press the tab on the left side of the box and pull the box fully out. Locate the next 5 screws in the soap dispenser housing. 3 are on the left, 2 are on the right. Use your Phillips head screwdriver to remove them, and I suggest to make sure it has a good magnetic pull on it. Make sure to note the location and orientation of the screws. Some are fine thread and others are coarse. Once you have that done, lift up on the left side of the interface about 15 degrees. Then pull it forward to unlatch it from the bulkhead. There are then 3 screws behind this interface at the top of the lid. Use a screwdriver to remove those 3 from the washing machine. And when you have those 3 removed, you can pull the top towards you and then off away from the washer, revealing the very top of the unit. With the top off, you can access the door lock narrowly through here towards the front of the washing machine that's on the right side. This should be similar to what you see from a top-down view. There's a button on the lock that can be pressed potentially to unlock it. Here's what it's going to look like with it out of the machine to get an idea of what you're looking for, and this was from another video we did. The small black protrusion is the unlocking mechanism to the door. If it's pressed in, it should force the striker assembly out and unlock the door from the inside out. One other issue could be that the striker is having issues that you would need to possibly reorient or replace, as it can adjust a little bit when it is running. Next, let me show you how to replace the door lock. First, take a Phillips head screwdriver and remove the 2 screws holding the door lock cover in place. Once you have the first 2 screws off, there are 2 more screws holding the actual door lock into place. Once you have all 4 screws totally removed, the door lock can be lifted up and out to move it away from the door. Then you're going to take a flat-bladed screwdriver or a pair of needle nose pliers and pry the door boot seal up and out of the way. You can roll the door gasket out of the way, exposing the door lock on the right side. Note that the door could be reversible, and you want to look at the left side of the door as well behind the gasket. There are wires on that side for a dummy lock that could have been damaged, which could cause some very odd door lock issues as well. The door lock can carefully be removed at this point through the door gasket. Be very careful with the wires. There's a small retaining tab on the harness that needs pressed in. Then you can remove the lock from the harness. You can do a visual inspection of the lock if you like, but one key here also is to look at the wires that went to the lock. They could be frayed or damaged, and if they were, the wire harness needs replaced. I'll have a link to that in the description, as well as the lock itself. With the door lock off, separated from the machine, you can test it with a multimeter, or you could even test it with it still being on the wires theoretically. To test the door lock, you want to take the multimeter and set it to ohms resistance. The lock itself should return the OL symbol with the leads against any prong if the door striker is not inserted into the door lock. When you insert the door striker, you still are not going to get any signal from the multimeter no matter what you test it with from pin 1 to pin 2 or from 2 to 3. But if you press the door lock button down like what you're seeing here on the video, you should get a reading of about 118 to 127 ohms between pins 2 and 3. After this, the next step is to test the pins while pressing the door closing button as you see here. When the door is supposed to be locked and then you depress the button, you should be getting roughly 125 ohms of resistance, again give or take about 10 ohms, on the multimeter between pins 1 and 2 and then pins 2 and 3. If you fail to get any resistance, then the door lock is bad and you need to replace it. So again, you need to have the black shaft out like the door is locked, and then press in on the switch to see if you get a reading. If you get a reading between all of the pins, technically the door lock should be good. If you don't, again, it's bad. Next, let's go ahead and reinstall the door lock after all the testing or replacement. Again, if you needed one, I'll have a link to buy from our store, which will support the channel, and that will be in the description as well as a few different tags. Plug the door lock back in, then make sure it reseats properly on the top of the square hole where the door lock goes. Make sure that the door lock is in place, and then install the 2 screws to the lock and then the 2 that are on the cover on top. And slowly work the gasket around the lip of the washing machine. This is a little tedious. If you need to, use some dish soap to coat the inner lip of the gasket. It can make this job a little bit easier. The door boot spring is next. These GE units have a much wider spring than other brands, so typical spring tools don't work. I have a video where I used cable ties and a wrench to solve this. I'm using a different tool here that actually works really, really well, and I will have a link to it in the description. Carefully place it back into the seam of the gasket like you see here. Once you've installed the door lock, in most cases, your washing machine should be fixed. You could put the washing lid back on, finish reinstallation of the other components, but let's say that you are still having some sort of issue. What else would you look at? The final most difficult test would be to use your multimeter and test the control board while attempting the forced lock and unlock command regarding the door lock mechanism. Again, you're going to go to the forced mode, which is then on test number 13 for the door lock. When that is attempting to run, you could take your multimeter out, then on AC voltage, and press the leads of the multimeter into the J513 pinout. You should look for a 120 volt signal between pin 2 and pin 3 when you call for the door lock command. If you don't see 120 volts coming out of the control board on any combination between pin 2 and pin 3 or any of the others, then there's the high likelihood that the board itself has failed and needs replaced, and I'll have a link to that in the description. Alternatively, you could unplug the power to the unit with the board still accessible, unplug the harness, and then go from the harness to the door lock using a test for resistance like we saw earlier with everything unplugged and the door lock out. You would look for that 120 ohms of resistance, and if you didn't see that, depending on the style of the door being open or closed, you would know that the harness is bad and you need to investigate that much further and then replace the wire harness. These are all the things that could cause the issue with your door lock situation on your GE washing machine. I'm going to have a link to the wire harness and the door lock in the description, as well as the control boards. Now let's go ahead and finish the video out with how to put the remaining components back together. Then you have 3 screws that hold the lid into the console bulkhead. Finally, slot the console into place. On the right side, there are 2 very wide head screws that the console kind of pivots and snaps into from right to left, and if put in place properly, it just all snaps and fits together. You have to insert the 5 screws to the dispenser housing. I like to pull the blue dispenser towards the front of the unit when inserting the screws. It should go very snugly together, securing the console and dispenser to the bulkhead. Then reinsert the dispenser into place. Everything should now be done and fixed. I wish these machines weren't as nebulous on the fixes, and I try to go over everything that I could think of on the machine. Make sure to watch my diagnostic video. That may be able to help you if you can get into that system and run some codes very quickly before it resets. I hope this video does help most people solve the issue, and I hope you have a great day.